to do the intro?
I'll go ahead and start intro. You introduce the person we're going to be talking about and yourself afterwards as well. But hi, everybody who's over on Alex's channel. My name is Suris. Usually I use a VTuber avatar for expressing myself on my channel, but I've been doing mostly face cam stuff recently because I've been doing a lot of going over Project 2025. And I kind of think that plays off a little better when you're taking it a little more seriously instead of laughing at it from behind a Catgirl avatar. Nick Fuentes, on the other hand, I will gladly rip apart behind a Catgirl avatar because it's way funnier that way. But that said, over on my channel, I cover politics and religion and trauma and all kinds of fun stuff that nobody should ever be talking about on the internet at all, but you're already here, so I don't think you're gonna be doing much but just suffering anyway. I've also got a Magic the Gathering channel called Suris MTG if you want vibes and cardboard instead of suffering and pain. But, you know, either way. That said, Alec.
Yeah, of course. Hi, my name's Alec Gunter. Hello to all of Suris's chat and YouTube peoples. I basically do react content. I react to people like this guy that we're about to react to, Brian Holdsworth, who we'll get into in a second. Basically just people who don't quite understand what they're talking about, who don't seem to very much like gay and trans people that much. Sometimes, you know, I do what is it? And sorry, I'm bad at this.
Your brain just shot itself.
Yeah, it really did. Anti-apologist content. That's what I'm thinking of. Anti-apologist when it comes to like religion. Just making sure that we keep the record straight on like what's acceptable as far as religion goes, which, you know, hating gay people is not. And I've been kind of on that kick lately, so that's what I've been doing. I also crochet. So I've been doing a lot of Pokemon crochet dolls. I've actually been playing with a Voltorb here in my hands, so you can see that.
Fair enough. He's
yeah,
adorable.
It's been really fun. Thank you. He's on sale now on my store. You can find it in my YouTube description. So if you want him, he can be all yours. So we're about to go over this guy named Brian Holdsworth. He describes himself as a struggling Catholic thinker, apologist, writer, speaker, and communication professional. Makes commentaries on topics he finds interesting, which focus on culture, morality, and religion, informed by his experience as a practicing Catholic. I've gone over a couple of his videos already on my channel. I know that Suris briefly watched one of his videos when I introduced Suris to him. So
I feel like I've probably covered this guy years ago, maybe, but I don't know. Like it's lost in the miasma of the past. Yeah,
so he's got such bangers as Are Gay Priests a Thing, which I think is the one you watched.
Yeah, I watched the Are Gay Priest one, and the conclusions he came to in that one were some of the most confusing things I've ever heard, like, penned to paper and then let out in mouth. Just the whole, like, actually, we should be defining them not by the people they've harmed, but no, by the oaths they took. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. So if somebody has an abusive stepfather, we should know them not by them being an abusive stepfather, but by the I-do's that happened in the marriage beforehand. Okay, that sounds very stupid, but sure, you do you.
Yeah, that was bizarre. And then also I noticed he was doing a lot of no true Scotsman fallacy with, you know, if you're like gay, then you're not really a priest. And if you're a priest, then you're not really gay. You know,
which
like,
doesn't make any fucking sense.
It was bizarre. I also got to go over this new one that he just released because this looks interesting. Female altar servers are a bigger problem than you think.
Oh my god.
That looks like a fun one.
It's only a bigger problem. It's only a big problem if you have an issue with paladin women. Which I do, so.
True. Oh, you do? Uh-oh. Well, we won't get into that. I don't want to let Katie know that.
Oh, dear.
All right. So we got a good one here. We got, why are atheists angry at God? Suris, are you angry at God? I'm just curious.
Not really. So there's a couple angles I can go ahead and preempt this with. It's hard for me to be angry at God in any way that's different than me being angry at any other fictional character, because I don't view God as anything other than a fictional character. I do have some residual anger for the idea of the Christian God for a lot of reasons. Not in the like somebody can't be Christian, being Christian is bad sense. That'd be a stupid take. In the sense that I do not like the person who many people's idea of God warps people into. The person who, especially the Old Testament, warps people who, say, are part of the NIFB into. I do not like that thing. But it's more akin to not liking an idea than it is to disliking a person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that the question being posed here is because this person does believe in God, that, you know, atheists are literally angry at the person God, when the way that you're describing it is we're angry at the ideas that the idea of God and the ideas that puts into people's heads about reality and about, you know, like I was saying earlier, gay and trans people, or you know, people of any minority group that Christians tend to go after. You know, they literally would use back in the day Christianity to justify slavery, for instance.
Yeah, so
and it's like, well, that's a great reason to be angry at the concept of God, you know?
Yeah, it's less being angry at your God and more being angry at the person that you become when you hide behind that idea. It's a lot of extension of religious trauma, honestly, is mostly what it boils down to. But let's go ahead and get into the video. Let's see, what English words does he say out of his mouth hole?
Absolutely. And just let me know when you want me to pause it.
Sure.
I recently saw a clip of an exchange between a street evangelist and a crowd of people that he was trying to evangelize. And at one point, an older man introduced his own contribution to the exchange by offering his own version of the problem of pain argument against the existence of God. And his remark was something like, how can God allow 6 million Jews to get murdered during the Holocaust? How can he sit by and do nothing when innocent children are abused in horrific ways or die of terrible diseases? And before the evangelist was able to respond, because this was supposed to be an interactive format, the man with the objection turned his back and walked away, refusing to listen to whatever answer might come.
So a lot of that comes down to the fact that we've heard damn near every objection that you can possibly come up with. Now, I will at least say this. It's funny that Brian is using that particular evangelist, because that particular evangelist tends to be much more progressive than what Brian seems to showcase on his channel. Because I've looked at a few of his videos before. They've come up on my shorts feed. But that said, a lot of us just want to have that final word because we are very tired. I know I'm very tired about having the why don't you believe in God conversation. I believed in God for over 18 years. I stopped believing for my own reasons. And I am now here. A lot of times, it's not that I want to have a particular dialogue with somebody on the street. I'll probably just tell them something to shut them up so I can go on and carry on with my day.
Yeah, I mean, after a certain amount of times that you ask this question, you're just doing it to make a point. You know, like you're not really interested in the answer anymore because you've already heard. I mean, we just literally watched a video where the entire time they were just dancing around the answer. And that's probably what this guy is going to do as well, is just dance around the answer and say, well, that doesn't really solve the problem of evil. You know, and it's like we're not trying to solve the problem of evil in this question. We're trying to question where the evil came from to begin with. You know, and that's very important for Christians to be able to answer, or people of any religious denomination, if they believe that their God is all-knowing, all-loving, and all-powerful. Also, just real quick, you froze again, and I would hate to leave you on, like, frozen like this unless you're okay with that. Like, you don't look bad or anything. It's not a bad still, but...
You know what? We'll just have me as a still frame. It's fine. It's better than stopping a billion times trying to fix it.
And now you're working again. I don't know if it's just when the video was playing.
That's weird.
Okay. We'll roll with it.
And it was clear that he was angry. He was gesturing aggressively, raising his voice, and in the end, he was too angry to wait for any kind of a response. And I don't think, and this is based on my own experience, which is quite extensive, that this kind of thing is exceptional. that conversations about the existence of God can evoke this kind of emotional response, which is strange when you really think about it, right? Like, imagine
it's not so much that a conversation about God is emitting the response. It's when we're talking about a street evangelist, a lot of it's because, and don't get me wrong, this sounds really arrogant, but I've got better fucking shit to do. That's what it comes down to a lot of the times, is just, I've got better shit to do than hear you talk about why you love Jesus. It's not going to be any different than the last 12 people who've stopped me on the street. It will be no different. It never is. So
yeah, I mean, I do it for content, you know? Like, when I look at these videos, it makes great content. It brings in some views, makes me a little bit of money, and that's fantastic. And it also helps, you know, hopefully pull some people in who may not have considered my point of view. But when you're just out on the street like that, it's like, you know, talking to an evangelist, a street preacher or whatever. I
just kind of want to go to the store and get food.
Right. And not be, you know, pestered by people who believe that that 6 million Jews being killed in the Holocaust was okay because it was all part of God's plan or something. You know, like, that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Because I haven't seen this video, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that there's going to be something about, well, you're looking at this only from your limited perspective. You're not looking at it from God's perspective, which is expansive and huge. And I have a counter argument for that one, but let's see where we go.
Expansive and huge. Not the only thing here that's expansive and huge.
Wieners.
Yeah, that. I'm gonna say. Have I showed you my Mew doll that I'm working on, by the way?
Oh, it's like a scaled up version of Trump's dick.
It's not a penis. It's just gonna be
Vice
Mew.
Rhino, thank you for the subscription. Holdsworth literally says in another video that black people are inferior, but we should treat them equally anyways because of God. Oh, okay. Also, Hannah, hi. Thank you for the raid. How was your stream? It is good.
That's what. Sorry.
I was gonna say real quick. Anybody who's coming in from Hannah's stream, go ahead and hit the ! collab command, and that will give you a link to Alec Gunter's stream, who I'm collaborating with right now.
Yes, and if you come over to my stream, unfortunately, Suris is frozen again. Yeah. I don't know what's wrong with it, but I forgot what I was going to say.
I just really liked that pose. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's keep going.
Two pundits were debating who they thought should be, I don't know, like the rookie of the year in Major League Baseball. And without really listening to the other person, one of them just spent most of his time and effort personally ridiculing and denouncing the other person, and then eventually just stormed away without listening to any kind of a response.
Okay, I remember what I was going to say. Sorry. Okay. Black people are inferior, but we still shouldn't discriminate. It is a very interesting take. Thank you for reminding me, Grays. And what I was going to say about that is that's one of those, you did the math wrong, but like
you
still
got the right
somehow
answer.
Arrived. Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, yeah, you're right. We shouldn't treat them any differently. But like you...
Not because God.
You did the work wrong. Yeah, you did the work wrong to get to that point. Anyway.
If you were a witness to that kind of interaction, wouldn't you likely conclude that the enraged pundit was informed more by some personal resentment than reason and logic?
I mean,
and what I find
I can agree that there's certainly like more personal resentment going on there. The question isn't whether or not personal resentment's going on. I'm wholly willing to believe the old dude had some personal resentment. My question my question would be more on the why, because like, for me, as someone who's 32, who's already been accosted too many fucking times, even at work, I mean, not now because my work is now here, but back when I used to work at Aldi, there was a religious dude who worked at my Aldi who would constantly evangelize to me, and everyone else at work was just like, yeah, that's normal, that's fine. Like, there was one woman there who would do the whole, like, if evolution's true, why is there still monkeys? afterwards.
Nice.
While the
Classic.
one person was trying to be an actual informed apologist, and the other one was trying to be just a really, really obnoxious person that probably should have been doing literally anything else with their life. I got very, very tired of it. And when I would go home, a lot of my times online would be dealt with seeing a lot of the same thing. A lot of people telling me that I should believe in God or I'm going to go to hell and so on and so forth. Eventually, you just get fucking tired of it. So, again, I don't care whether or not the dude had resentment in his heart. I care about the why that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, like, I don't jump to judgment about that person because that person's not the one evangelizing. They're just trying to go about their life. So
Yeah.
I don't care as much.
Significant sample size of atheists, which I've been exposed to in this kind of work, is that they
So
don't
your
just
personal
disagree with
experience.
certain doctrines of religion like Christianity. They hate it in an unambiguous way. The lack of ambiguity is demonstrated by the consistent habit of relying on condescension, ridicule, and what Chesterton called the sneer.
Dude, the number of times I've seen Christians sneer at atheists and be like, I'll pray for you. You know, like, I'm sorry, they started the condescension first. You cannot convince me otherwise.
I don't care about the condescension. I don't. I think both snooty Christians and fedora atheists both do the snooty shit to each other. I think that the important thing is digging a layer deeper than that. The snooty stuff isn't and has never been the issue. The issue is, for the atheist, a lot of times it's, well, what are you trying to prove? Is your goal to tell people that God doesn't exist? Are you basically evangelizing the same way that Christians have been doing? Or are you just trying to go about your day and let people know, hey, maybe there's some abusive tendencies that have come with your God belief? And then for the Christian, the conversation ends up going, hey, what bigotries are you basically using your book to hide behind about? Like, in Brian's case,
Yep.
Do you not like black people, but you hide behind your book to give you a reason to treat them like human beings? Because that's really fucking weird. You understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, like, with the condescension thing, I'm just so tired. Like, I know that atheists can be condescending. I get it. But I do feel like there is a condescension to being like, I'll pray for you, or like, I'll, like, it's which is way more grating to me. Like, maybe it's just because I am an atheist, but I feel like I can empathize more with the condescension that comes from atheists. Even if you're like a fedora wearing lay Reddit atheist, wiping the crumbs off your beard before you know, you swipe them off your neck beard before you tippy tap on your keyboard about how much better you are than the Christians, you know, which I don't agree with that, but you know, like I don't know. To me, it's just not this. Like, it's not the same vibe. This could be a vibes thing on my part.
It could be.
Yeah.
They don't just disagree, they consider the thing to be contemptible. And that hatred can compel a person to refuse any possible evidence that might be presented to them, with more than a few leading atheists having admitted this kind of a prejudice. Because what kind of a person
What evidence
trying
is
to position
he
them?
bringing? What new evidence is he bringing for a deity? I'm genuinely confused. I will never fault somebody for simply the act of believing in a god. I don't think that that's the right thing to do. But I also will not go on the other side of that and say, yeah, you did bring up a good point. You said God works in mysterious ways, and it totally wasn't the 13,000th time I've heard that in the last year. So you've definitely given me new evidence that I need to ascertain and ruminate on.
Yeah, the evidence usually boils down to, like, personal experience is one. I know I just really recently watched personal experience is the most common one, where it's like, well, I almost died, or my friend almost died, and they saw God or saw heaven or whatever. So that's a really common one, but that's not evidence. I just recently watched, it was really funny. Have you heard of, like, the math proof of God?
Yes, I have. It's the math proof of God, isn't it just I had to roll a dice 12 bajillion times to come to the likelihood of an event happening, and that's the same likelihood that human beings coming to be in the way we understand them is therefore God, because unlikely things never ever happen. That's basically what it boils down to.
Yeah. That, and then Redeemed Zoomer also said something, because I was watching his video
Redeemed
about
Zoomer. Anyway.
Right? But I was watching his video, and he said something about like certain equations will bring us to exactly 0, or like if you add pi with another number, it brings you to exactly 1. I can't remember exactly. But I was like,
who cares?
That's what I was saying. We came up with the numbers. Like, it works out that way because we conceptualized it. You know, that's not like a cosmic coincidence. That's humanity doing math.
Math,
I don't know.
I'm sorry, math doesn't prove God, but if it did, I don't think it necessarily proves the Christian God. It would prove the concept of a deity, maybe, and that's about as far as it would go.
That's exactly what I said. Like, you can prove the concept of infinity. You know, like, we have to have a concept for that, and
but it doesn't point to an infinite being.
Right. Exactly.
Themselves as rational would open a debate by admitting that they are unwilling to consider any possible evidence that could be presented for the existence of God, because that
most of the time I don't see atheists saying that. They say, like, I'm open to evidence, I just haven't seen any good evidence yet.
Yeah,
right?
I guess it depends though. So, like, for a lot of atheists, a lot of us existing on the internet, there's a bit of a script some of us go by, and it's not that we have an internal Bible to base the script off of. It's that we've had a certain amount of stimuli, and we have a response to that stimuli that gets kind of codified over time. And on the internet, yes, a lot of us do have the I'm open to evidence, but I doubt you're going to present any, that kind of shtick. I feel like if you go out and deal with regular Joes on the street, you might get more myriad responses than that. Again, likely due to people wanting to just get on with their day instead of being accosted by random old men on the street. But the fact is still there. There could be a variety of responses out there, but here on the internet, people act in somewhat more predictable ways. It's a lot like when you and I went to Yonkers and we'd talk to people during canvassing. The way people act online with politics and the way people act when you're standing in their doorway are two very different beasts.
That's completely fair. I didn't consider that. I have somebody in my YouTube chat that says, I ask a bunch of atheists if the Christian God existed, would they believe in him? And if they don't, do you think it rational not to? If he existed, we would have evidence for it. Like, or you need to provide evidence that he exists in order for somebody to believe in him. Like he could exist. You know, I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's no evidence yet that we've seen.
Like, as an example, is it rational to believe that your partner is cheating on you? We know that partners cheating on partners happen. We know that this is a thing that happens in reality. But the existence of partners cheating does not itself yield information on whether or not your partner is cheating. You have to provide more evidence than that. When you start providing evidence, those of you who have gone through it, I'm sure that you're already thinking of them right now, and I've just brought up some trauma for you, so I apologize for that. But the fact of the matter is, there is follow-up questions there. So if you go, if God exists, is it not rational to believe in him, or it, whatever concept of God we're working with this week? The problem that you run into is, much like with cheating partners, the existence of the thing, the existence of the concept, isn't necessarily enough of a reason to believe in it right then and there. You still need to have something on top of that. You need to have a pattern of behavior. You need to have something that you can identify, something that you can point to. Whether or not a God exists is kind of irrespective of whether or not I believe in him if there's no evidence for me to actually look at in the first place.
Right. I have just as much evidence that God exists as I do that the flying spaghetti monster exists. That whole thing, right? Like it could be any number of things out there. Like I simply don't have evidence. If I did, then I would be much more convinced.
Yeah.
But since I don't, I'm not.
And again, for a lot of people, it comes down to we weigh evidence in various ways. For instance, somebody who has had a history of being cheated on with partners may be more likely to believe unscrupulous evidence for their partner because there is a history of that. That doesn't make it more or less rational for them to believe it. It just gives them another point in the bucket for that being enough for believing them. I'm wholly ready to admit that Brian Holdsworth has received enough evidence to believe in a god, enough that satisfies his epistemology. That's fine. What I'm also saying as a follow-up is I've not received enough evidence myself, and I don't think that the evidence that works for him might meet the same criteria of evidence that I might require. What I do know, though, is that if we're talking about an all-knowing God, which not all God concepts are, but if we are talking about an all-knowing God, whatever it'll take to convince me, he already knows what that is, and he's actively choosing not to do it.
True.
So
True.
that feels like a problem for the ball being thrown in your God's court.
I always say, like, if God does exist and he's all-knowing and he wants me to know that he exists, then he would find a way to make sure that I know.
Yeah, if we're talking about the Christian triomni God, like this doesn't apply to, like this obviously doesn't apply to a lot of pagan gods who, whether they want you to believe in them or not, will come down to whether or not they want to be fucking affiliated with you. Like for a lot of pagan deities, it's literally, did they want to sit with you at the lunch table? No? Okay, fuck off. Like that's kind of what it comes down to in some of those faiths, and it's a different set of criteria.
Yeah. All right, we'll keep going.
That would be an admission that this isn't about reason or evidence for them, but rather their own preferences and prejudices. But when pressed on this question, I've seen some leading atheists like Richard Dawkins and Peter Atkins come to mind, admit that there isn't any possible evidence that would persuade them. For example, if they were to witness like a miracle, some event that is impossible without supernatural intervention, which is the only kind of evidence that could exceed reasonable doubt.
I have a question. What kind of thing would meet that criterion? I say that because as human beings, the way that we identify things is by comparison. That's how we do things. We have a frame of reference, and that's what we base things on. When you eat a new fruit and you've not eaten one before, you compare it to all the fruits you've had before, and that's where you get your flavor profile for it. You'll eat, say, a lotus fruit, and you'll say, oh, it has kind of an appley, it has a kind of a grapey texture, but it has kind of an appley taste, and eventually you might be able to just figure out what lotus fruit tastes like, but you're still going, your first time experiencing it, you're going to compare it to everything else that you've had there. Since impossible events have not happened, what frame of reference do we have for figuring out that this thing was impossible outside of miracle? How did we come to that conclusion when we literally cannot bring up a mode of comparison?
Right, like if I see, like let's take it for instance, like if somebody is dead and then they suddenly spring back to life, my assumption is not a miracle just happened. My assumption is that person probably was not dead to begin with.
Yeah, or
there has to be a scientific explanation.
Yeah, we hit him with a defibrillator, or like they had a blood clot that just released right then. There's any number of things that we can find, and oftentimes we find that that is the case. Hell, there was a documentary that I watched when I was a kid that gave a scientific explanation for every one of the 10 plagues of Egypt, of all things. You can find reasons for several phenomenon, whether or not those phenomenon even happened, which of course with the 10 plagues we know they didn't, because the Egyptians were record keepers and we have no record of the plagues.
Super Duper in the chat asks, what I ask is if it is a fact that the Christian God exists as a hypothetical, and so I'm assuming we know that he exists. In this hypothetical, you know him to exist, and the question would you worship him? The most rational answer is yes to me.
The most rational answer is not yes. The most rational answer is depending on... So, to that to give an allegory to that, you live in if you're living in a fascist country, is the most rational thing worshiping the fascist and pushing forward that regime and adding and swelling power to it, or is it more rational to try to fight against it to change that status quo? Your situations may vary, but one of these sounds like the coward response.
Yeah, in that scenario, the fascist would essentially be God over you. I mean, they have the power of the military at their fingertips. They can kill you at a moment's notice. They might as well be God in that sense. But am I going to worship him? No, of course not. He's a fascist. He sucks. Like, I might outwardly say that I do so that I don't get murked, but like internally, no, I would hate him.
Yeah, you would do the things you need for personal preservation, and you wouldn't go a step further.
Right, and if we're talking about a God that can like detect what's going on inside of my brain, well, then I'm screwed either way, because I would think that he's, the Christian God as he's laid out in the Bible is not a good person. I'm sorry. So, I can't help what I think about him. So he's just going to probably just send me to hell, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah, we won't have very much ability to do anything in that scenario, but now we have to talk about whether or not God is revoking our consent, in which case God is a rapist. There we go.
Oof.
But
true.
Let's see where we're at.
Yep.
They would rather conclude that they were hallucinating or had gone insane than admit that something supernatural had actually occurred.
Yes.
And of course, this standard of skepticism, which I would claim is unreasonable, can be applied to anything.
Wait, why is that unreasonable?
It's literally them saying they're suspending their belief. They're suspending their belief in the thing to see if there's a rational explanation. That doesn't feel that feels perfectly reasonable.
That's completely reasonable. Can be applied
if
to
I
anything,
hate
though.
the idea that the earth is round and the possibility of it being round agitates me to the point of anger and contempt for those who disagree with me, then any evidence, even evidence that I experience firsthand in support of this claim, is something that I could just chalk up to the failures of my own faculties of perception. Like my eyes and my brain are simply...
I agree with him on this point that our own faculties are not enough most of the time. This is why we also rely on the faculties of others. This is why in science we have things like peer review and replicatability, because one person's scenario may not be enough to figure out if something is true. The souls experiment, where we tried to figure out what the weight of a human soul was. We found that there were plenty of phenomenon that were causing little bits of weight to redistribute themselves away from the human body during the decomposition process. When we were far more ignorant, we assumed that this was the soul leaving the body, and therefore the human soul had a particular weight. And then when more scientists started trying to do that experiment again with proper controls, they found, he pooed in his pants. There's where the mass went. Turns out there were actually very rational explanations for where matter was going in the body.
That's really funny. Sorry, that wasn't the soul. That was actually a pile of shit.
There's a little bit of dookie.
It's funny, they actually use that concept in One Piece, though, because the soul does exist in One Piece. So
but in anime, it's fine.
Yeah. So in One Piece world, checkmate atheists, God exists.
He also exists. So further checkmate, he exists in Dragon Ball as well, but he's got a power level we can scan, so you can get stronger than God and kick his fucking ass.
Hell yeah, dude. I'm all for it. Let's go. They introduced God like 70 times in that show, though. They're like, here's Kami, which literally means God. Then they introduce the Supreme Kai. King Kai. Then the Supreme... Yeah, it just keeps going on and on. So eventually there will be another Zeno or something. Who knows?
Super
deceiving me. And if I did that, wouldn't that be evidence of my own irrationality on this subject?
Yeah, if you don't peer review it, that's basically your sixth sense there. I mean, I think of it like this. Somebody who has... If you take a person who has some kind of hallucinatory disorder, like schizophrenia, I've worked with schizophrenic patients before. They say they see things, they say they feel things that aren't there, and without a frame of reference, yes, they might truly believe that those things are there. But when everyone around them is telling them, no, that's not there, that's the peer review. So that part is very important.
Yes, it would. Which is why atheists who demonstrate such animosity towards theism and who refuse to allow any evidence to be presented to them should be treated in the same way. These are not rational people offering reasonable degrees of skepticism. These are people motivated by emotions and personal animus, and to whatever degree that they invoke their rational faculties, it's at the service of their emotions and prejudices.
Man, Brian, I hate to tell you this. That's every human being. That's all of us. Every single one of us has this really cool thing called type 1 thinking, and then we have type 2 thinking. Type 1 thinking is your emotional response. That's the response that says the lion is in the bush and it's going to eat me. Type 2 thinking is your logical response, but it happens much later, after the survival instinct kicks in. What Brian's doing is describing an understood and quantifiable phenomenon for 100% of human beings that he is also subject to. Every single argument made against atheists here exists for his brand of Christian just as well. They have an emotional investment in a god, and literally the idea of hell is held over their soul, literally, as a bargaining chip for that particular emotional investment.
Yeah, and they're told if they ever stray away from that, well, they're going to hell. So, there's really no getting out of that one.
I think is going on with a lot of the people who rail against the existence of God, and anyone who supports that claim is described by C.S. Lewis in his autobiography, recounting the inconsistency of mind and heart that he suffered with when he was an atheist. He says this: I was at this time living like so many atheists or anti-theists in a whirl of contradiction. I maintained that God did not exist. I was also very angry with God for not existing. I was equally angry with him for creating a world. And
that's really weird.
But that's yeah, it's just his personal experience, man. That doesn't describe all atheists. And also, atheist and anti-theist is not the same thing.
No, actually, there are people who can be theists who are anti-theists. They believe God exists and they want to kill the motherfucker. They want to do deicide.
Based. I love that.
That's reminiscent for me of another quote by G.K. Chesterton when he said, the worst moment for an atheist is when he's really thankful and has no one to thank. And that's true enough.
No, that's not the one. No, there's plenty of things I can be thankful to. I can be thankful for this cat for not blading my feet while I'm sleeping. There's plenty of things to be thankful for and plenty of ways to be thankful for them. We just point things at the signpost better, I think.
I'm thankful that I came into a I did say that.
I'm thankful that I came.
Yes, I am thankful for that. I say that every time I do that to my fiance. But no, I'm.
Thank you for letting me come, honey.
Thank you. No, but in all seriousness, I am thankful that I came into this world at the time that I did, as opposed to like in the 14th century when there was like no infrastructure, when there was horrific disease and pestilence. I think it was like the 14th century. I could be wrong on this. Whenever the Black Plague was, the Middle Ages. Point is, I live in a society that has been built on top of like layers and layers of other people's work. And I am extraordinarily thankful for that. I wouldn't be able to live the life that I live now. I wouldn't have nearly the comforts that I do now. But that's not thanks to God. That's thanks to the people who all came before me. And I feel like just watering that down to God did it, or like, even something as simple as like surviving a car accident when I was 8, At first I thought, well, God did that. No, God didn't do that. The car manufacturers did that.
It's like, no, the car manufacturers did it, and by the grace of you being a young child with far more malleable bones.
I mean, my mom was also in it, and she survived. She was, not fine, but she was fine. You know what I mean?
She lived.
She lived. Yeah, we all lived.
She got to take. Anyway. She got to take the selfie afterwards that says just caption, "I lived, bitch."
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. But I used to attribute that to God, and it's there is a physical explanation for that, and so I'm thankful for the car manufacturer that built the car well enough that caused me to not get into that accident, or to not die in that accident. But I can also be, I guess, on another point, this is kind of a tangent, I can also be angry that we live in a society dominated by car infrastructure. If that was God's doing, then God really screwed up on that one.
Yeah,
So,
I really think that it would be far better if we all just lived in walkable cities. That would be grand. But what am I doing? I live in not quite the suburbs, but far in the woods in the suburbs.
Super Duper says, if God exists, he is the good by definition. And
No.
ethic you hold that opposes God is irrational in this hypothetical.
Therefore, if
What
God
rationale?
if God wants rape to happen, then rape is good. Do you hear the words coming out of your mouth? Are
Yeah, that's a
you
really
willing to
easy
just
one,
say
man.
rape is good? Like, no. God is not by definition good. God defines himself as good, which, by the way, doesn't make him unique amongst every other cogent being. All of us believe that we are good in some form or fashion. His is not any better or unique in any way.
If you truly do believe in an all-knowing, all-powerful God, and you believe that God is all good all the time, then I disagree with your God. The only difference is that I have no power against him. He just exerts his version of goodness over me via force, which is not good.
Like, if we want to just agree that might makes right, then
Yeah.
all right, cool. If the United States decides that you're a threat to security and they just send the National Guard or a SWAT team to your house and kill you, it was good. Like, it can't be anything but good. They had the power there. They made the decision. That
Plus,
must
it was
have
part of
been
God's
good.
plan.
It was also
And it
part,
was
of
part of
God's
God's plan.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it was good.
it had to be. It's
But the
exactly what God wanted.
Exactly. It had to be.
Reverse, I think, is also true for a lot of atheists, in which they find themselves outraged about some perceived injustice in the world, but have no one to direct their complaint to. As a
What?
Christian, I believe
Some
that God
perceived
cares
injustice
about my...
in the world. Hold on, let me think of a few perceived injustices. So women lost the right to having rights over their own uteruses. I'm pretty sure I can blame the Supreme Court and Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell for that one. Let's see here. There's a whole bunch of people being killed in Gaza. Pretty sure I can blame Israel and Russia for that one. Oh yeah, Ukraine being invaded. I can just blame Russia for that one. That one's easy. Taxes being as high as they are for people who are working independently. Pretty sure I can blame Reagan for that one when he reformed the tax codes. Name me an injustice that I can't point the finger at where it fucking happened. I can do that. It's pretty easy.
I was low T for a while. So, where does that come from, huh?
Your
I
dad's
question you
wiener.
that.
Your dad's wiener didn't wiener enough.
God damn it, Dad. Fuck. All right, let's keep going.
no one to direct their complaint to. As a Christian, I believe that God cares about my prayers, and so there have been times when I've complained to him, I've raised my objection, and I also firmly believe that he honors those moments. He doesn't just rebuke me or smite me for it. He receives.
I want to stop for a second because I do think that there is a therapeutic component to that. I think that it's almost like journaling, right? Like you're basically just venting frustrations. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but that doesn't mean that anybody's listening either. Like I said, it's like journaling. People keep diaries and stuff. So
It is good for your mental health.
yeah,
It is impossible to tell the difference between generalized euphoria for being in a crowd of like-minded people and the feeling you get in church. It is impossible to tell the difference psychologically between the feeling you get of spilling your emotions out on paper and the feeling of God comforting you for praying to him. There is no quantifiable difference in the way the brain responds to these types of things chemically. So I'm sorry. It's not that he's answering stuff. I agree with Alec. It's just journaling.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's not bad for you, but yeah, it is just journaling.
He honors those moments. He doesn't just rebuke me or smite me for it. He receives those strained expressions, it interacts with them, and leads me towards some kind of understanding about it. But the atheist in the clip that I saw
just therapy.
is distressed by historical events like the Holocaust and the seemingly arbitrary suffering of innocent people and children. Well and good, so am I. But my objections make sense in light of the fact that I believe in God who exists. If you don't believe there is anything more than matter and motion or the physical universe, on what grounds do you have to say that the world and the events captured in time should have been another way, which is what we're doing when we make moral objections?
But I feel like that's the other way around. Like, wait, hold on. Let me go back one more time, sorry.
What grounds do you have to say that the world and the events captured in time should have been another way, which is what we're doing when we make moral objections?
But if God but I guess I'm just not following, because if God exists and God is, again, this is just the whole argument of like, if God exists and he's all good, all knowing, and all powerful, then why did the Holocaust happen?
Yeah, it's
like
the only explanation then is that it was God's will. Like that's all you get.
It had to be. And so what you're saying then, by necessity, if God is all good, all knowing, and all powerful, then the Holocaust was good because it was part of God's plan. You have to say that. Like, that is the logical conclusion. So like, when you don't, if you don't believe in an all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful God, you can conceptualize things working out differently, more easily, because you don't just justify it by saying, or you know, brush it off by saying it was God's plan, you know. And so like, I don't know, am I making sense?
No, it makes sense. The only way that this works out is you have to be willing to say God wanted the Jews killed. Like that's where you have to go. Yeah. You logically have to step into that miasma. You don't get much of a choice.
Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't make much sense to me.
To say that things should be other than they are is to accuse the physical universe of being other than what it should be. How can you say that if the physical universe is all that there is? Like,
because I believe in free choice. Like, I believe in freedom of choice. You know, there is, like, it's difficult to quantify. I'll hand you that. But I do think that, I mean, and you can be influenced by a variety of things. You know, you can have your freedom influenced. But I still do believe that humans are individuals who are capable of ascertaining a situation and acting upon it, you know, like in their own independent way. I can believe in freedom of choice and people using that to do bad things without believing in a higher power.
Yeah, I don't need the extra bits added on. This is one of the wonderful things about, say, Occam's razor. When we make an assumption about something, we don't have to pile on assumptions about it. Oftentimes, it is better to operate within the confines of the conclusion that takes the least amount of assumptions. I can see people operating as if they have free will all the time. I don't need an invisible guy behind them allowing them to have free will because he spoke it into existence. That component is largely unnecessary.
Yeah, it's like Occam's razor. It's like, you know, the simplest explanation is the most reasonable. And so like, you're just adding pieces when you put God, when you stick God in there. I can't, even if I can't explain, I mean, it's a God of the gaps fallacy at the end of the day. Even if I can't explain why people have free will, that doesn't necessarily mean that God was the one who made it.
If I were playing a video game and it had fixed rules and code governing those rules, and something happens that I don't really like in the game, I might object and say that, yeah, it shouldn't have been configured that way, should have been a different way. But when I do that, I'm appealing, perhaps in a futile way, to the game developers. I'm saying they should have done this differently, but if there was no game developer, if the game was all that there was, on what grounds would I have to say it should have been made differently? That would be an entirely irrational.
So simple. By playing a different, better video game, I know that Bubsy 3D is a steaming pile of horseshit, and the developer should have made something different because I had the opportunity. I had the opportunity due to having loving parents that bought me Banjo-Kazooie. I know that Bubsy 3D is horseshit because I can compare it to Banjo-Kazooie. I can appeal to the design choices in other similarly designed, made at the similar time with similar technology video games. I can do that. Just like I can look at life before I get ass cancer AIDS and life after I get ass cancer AIDS and go, no, I shouldn't have had ass cancer AIDS. That's unfair, and that's not cool, because I can appeal to a better life that I can observe, or in many cases, experienced.
Yeah, maybe not the best debuff. Oh, God. Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying. My brain is starting to power down a little bit, but I understood most of that.
Rational sentiment. And atheists who express outrage about their moral misgivings are basically doing this. To rephrase Chesterton's remark, the worst moment for an atheist is when he is really angry about some injustice and has no one to direct his complaint. All he can do is just shake his fist at the sky and never...
Is he basically just saying that it's bad when we can't throw the blame places? Because...
Yeah, that is what he's saying, yeah.
So there's a friend of mine, Moriarty, on YouTube. He's a wonderful YouTuber, does a lot of very good work, did a really amazing expose against limited run games. Y'all should watch his content and check him out. His channel name is like spelled Mr. Ixit almost, because he tries to find weirdly esoteric ways to spell Moriarty. That's just what he does. I don't know why he does that specific thing. But anyway, the important part about this isn't that. The important part about this is he made an observation to a group of YouTubers recently. Like 4 of us, and we were around a grill after a rack of ribs had been cooked for far too long, and nobody had a chance to hang out with anybody else because they were too busy waiting for this rack of ribs to be cooked in the middle of an Airbnb. But that, again, that detail's besides the point. The point is, he made an observation about English language specifically, but a lot of languages that have the same roots as English as well. These languages have a very strange component to them, and that is how much of the language by default is directed at a person. A lot of times when we feel like somebody is blaming us for something, they're not blaming us for something, it's because the very first thing that we kind of naturally go to with American English is something that sounds like blame. For instance, let's say somebody spills milk. What's one of the first things you might say? Why did you do that? Our default sometimes isn't what happened. Even if we say, are you okay? We're still sitting at directed language. A shit ton of our language is directed.
I'll do you one better. You walk in and the milk is spilled and you say, who spilled this milk?
Who did this? Exactly.
Who did this?
We don't ask what happened. We ask who did this, because there must be something to point to. This is just kind of a basic thing that happens in our speech, and if you start looking for it, it's easy to point out the ways in which we blame people or blame things, not because we're specifically trying to aim blame at anybody, but because that's the first thing that our brain goes to. We're kind of wired for that if you grew up with English as your first language. So
that's so interesting.
When Brian says this, he's speaking to the same thing. Our compunction to assert blame places is very ingrained, especially in English. That doesn't necessarily mean there is a God, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it is some great travesty that we cannot point to a God for praise or blame. It's literally just an idiosyncrasy of English. That's all it is.
And monkey brain.
And monkey brain. We're pattern-seeking things. It's what allowed us to live. We saw that, hey, the lion comes out of the bush sometimes in the savannah. Maybe it's a good idea if I fuck off and eat a banana. That's just a thing that we did. and it let us propagate and survive.
Monkey brain go burr, baby. That's how we got here. Good stuff.
To direct his complaint. All he can do is just shake his fist at the sky and never get any satisfaction for it, because according to his own beliefs, the sky will neither listen nor care, making it an irrational thing to do. But if you feel this relentless impulse to judge the events that occur within space and time and say they should have been otherwise, which I would argue that every single human being has done, isn't that evidence that there is something more than space and time? Isn't that evidence?
No, that's evidence that I lived in a time before playing Bubsy 3D. That's all that means.
Yeah. And also that there's free will. Like you recognize that things can have different outcomes depending on people's choices. Like Hitler should not have killed 6 million Jews. Okay, that's a thing that Hitler should not have done. So if I recognize that free will exists and I see people exerting that free will, and I know that Hitler exerted his free will to take away the free will of 6 million Jews and, countless others, then I can say that, yeah, Hitler shouldn't have done that.
I will.
It doesn't seem complicated.
I will say this. First of all, to Schlusterd in the chat, here's a link to Moriarty's channel for people who are having trouble finding it. Again, he spells it very esoterically. I will say, actually, I disagree on free will existing. I actually don't believe free will exists. My argument for it's pretty simple. Honestly, it's not very big-brained. But it comes down to the fact that we understand that most, if not all, of our actions are determined in our subconscious milliseconds before we actually perform them. Often milliseconds before our brain processes, like the frontal lobe part of our brain, the decision-making part of our brain. Often this happens before we are even cogent that we are doing an action. We have already started doing it subconsciously. If we accept that most of our faculties are controlled in the same way, it's very hard to argue that we have free will. What I am willing to grant, though, are two things. We have a wonderful illusion of free will, and pragmatically speaking, we have to operate as if we have free will whether or not it exists. Because society literally just fucking collapses if we start saying that, yeah, no, nobody's got free will.
Or does it? Because, that would be predetermined.
Well, no, that would be fatalism. That's different.
Oh, is that different? Okay, sorry. I must have a misunderstanding.
Free will is just your ability to make a choice. It has nothing to do with their fatalism or determinism is everything's already set in stone. You're already going to do it. Free will and determinism do come into conflict with one another. But when we're talking about free will, just in the here and now, the only conversation I have there is that, well, your subconscious is doing the things before you, the person is you, the person that gets erased if you get a lobotomy, that you, before that person is even cogent of the thing happening. It says nothing about fate being predetermined. I have no evidence of that. But our bodies doing a lot of our things just kind of automatically, that we do know happens.
That's so interesting. I really have not given a ton of thought to the concept. I'll be honest with you. I always just kind of operate, like you said, operate on the assumption that it exists and not really think about it. So.
It's more healthy to do that. It's honestly far more healthy to do it that way. I'm not going to lie. Existentialism is a stupid endeavor. Don't fall into it, please. I beg of you.
Boy, okay. Maybe we'll just keep going then. Oh, no.
Of a moral law that indicates that somehow the material world we live in is not realizing its fullest potential. And if so, well, then what is that potential if not something that exists outside of space and time? It makes way more sense to believe in the supernatural, which is that which transcends and
You're having to make a lot of assumptions there. Again, I didn't need the supernatural to tell me that Bubsy 3D was a shitty game. I needed to play Banjo-Kazooie or Mario 64. That told me that Bubsy 3D was a shitty game because I got to play what a good game felt like. I don't need the god of 3D platformers to exist somewhere off in space, or the platonic ideal of a 3D platformer. Again, that's just fucking Banjo-Kazooie to exist somewhere. I don't need that.
Wouldn't this also imply that humans are incapable of conceptualizing anything outside of that which is happening unless God exists?
Which
Like-
would make us it would make it impossible for us to conceptualize God too. In which case, it's by God's design that we can't
True.
conceptualize God. In which case, that means that it's literally no human's fault that we do or do not believe in him, because we can't conceptualize him. He's literally written it outside of our ability.
Yeah. And also Bubsy 3D wouldn't exist if we couldn't conceptualize like it wouldn't exist in the first place because Bubsy himself is not real. Like I don't know if I'm making sense, but like whoever made that, like they had to have been able to conceptualize something that's not real. I don't know. Like I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Tasha says, I bounced off Banjo-Kazooie. I disagree with it being a platonic ideal of anything. Well, as Brian Holdsworth has showed me in this video, every human being is capable of being wrong. Anyway.
True, I'm wrong all the time, and people still watch me.
That's same here.
Yeah.
Exceeds the natural or the physical universe when we are held captive by these kinds of sentiments. We, on a daily basis, we can't avoid doing that. If you think the problem of pain is unresolvable, that doesn't mean that the supernatural or that God doesn't exist, just that you aren't morally aligned with it or with him. But you can at least then level.
So, I agree with him that the problem of evil, not the problem of pain, the problem of evil, does in fact not say whether or not a God exists. Because that is not and has never been a mechanic of the problem of evil. The problem of evil, the only thing that it has ever been meant to showcase is that if a God does exist, he's not a good guy. That's the only thing that it showcases. It is not a question of whether or not he exists. It is a question of whether or not an all good God exists. And if what Brian is saying is true, then God's version of morality includes ass cancer AIDS. And I'm sorry, but I don't think I believe in a version of morality that includes Bubsy 3D or ass cancer AIDS. I don't.
I don't know. Bubsy 3D brought us so much good content, though.
Yeah, but some of that came from JonTron.
Oh man, I used to love JonTron.
I used to love JonTron too. I still find his videos funny. I just hate that he's a fucking weird white nationalist.
Then he got all political.
Gaming was fun before it was political.
Before it got political. That's my main gripe with JonTron. Not that he's anti-Semite or anything.
It's that he got political.
Got political.
Your complaint in a rational way rather than just denouncing the universe of which you are a mere contingent part and of which doesn't care about your complaint.
Okay, so I want to speak to the manager of the universe. You obviously believe he exists, so obviously I can talk to the manager of the universe. Let's fucking go.
So wait, I thought we were supposed to be like thankful and grateful to God, and now you're saying you should complain to him. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like if God is this all good, knowing, loving, powerful guy, shouldn't you trust him, like, intrinsically? Like, you shouldn't complain to him. You know, I feel like you need to, like, take all of those complaints that you have about the universe and about how much your life sucks or whatever, and, like, just bottle that up because, like, God is all good. So whatever's going on with you must be good, right? You know, you can't really complain about it. So if you just chalk things up to like just being a, product of happenstance, just random chance, which, a lot of bad things that happen to you are just random chance, then I feel like that's way more, it's way more rational to be upset about that and to have complaints about that. That's just me. Anyway, let's finish this up.
I don't think he's got anything but credits.
Can I ask you to...
Oh, no. Is this a call to action to subscribe to his channel?
Yeah, he's just going to say subscribe and brianholdsworth.ca, whatever.
No, it's better for us to just go to ddlgplayground.com and go get something to fuck yourself with. Coupon code Suris still works for some ungodly reason. I don't know.
Or you can go to etsy.com/shop/guntergrabs and get your Pokemon plush dolls.
Do it. They're
my channel.
crocheted and cool.
Yeah, they're awesome. One of them looks like a penis currently, but it won't soon. It'll look like a Mew.
And then when he's done making his Amogus dildo Mew, for some reason, he'll start making a bunch of crocheted slime services for sale or something. I don't know.
Hey, maybe. That'd be a fun collab.
That would be a fun collab. I think I've still got it. I have a crocheted slime service somewhere. I'm trying to figure out where I have it.
Let me hang up real quick and see if I can get the video feed working again.
Okay. Here.
Hey, there we go.
Got it. It's right here. I do have it. Aha! I do have a crocheted slime service. Right about there.
Very nice. Let me fix this real quick so that people can see.
Yeah.
I just have to go live. There we go.
There we go. All things working now.
Yep. Oh, that's cute as shit. Who made that?
This was made by the girlfriend of one of my friends, Emily.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
I love it. It's very well done.
Put
That crocheting is really fun. Highly recommend.
Catharsis.
All right, well, you got anything else to add about the video before we end the recording?
Subscribe to both of our channels. Support us financially, or you support fascism.
True. Very good point.
There.
Subscribe today. Subscribe to me and Suris the Skeptic.
It's better
on
than
YouTube.
tithing to a Catholic administration that shuffles pedophile priests around.
Very true. Very true.
Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability a Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.